Somewhere in a museum right now, there is a human skull sitting in a display case. It's 4,000 years old. And if you look closely at its teeth, they're perfect. Straight. No gaps. No crowding. No wisdom teeth trying to force their way through bone. That skull never saw a dentist. Never wore braces. Never had anything extracted. Never had a retainer, never had headgear, never sat in a waiting room flipping through a magazine while someone prepared to pull a tooth out of their head. And yet its teeth are better than yours. Not because that person was lucky, not because they had good genes, but because of something that happened to the human face over the last few hundred years that almost nobody talks about. Your jaw is shrinking. And you didn't notice because it happened slowly. And it's still happening now. Go online right now and search for ancient human skulls. Any of them. Egyptian. Peruvian. Native American. Medieval European. It doesn't matter. What you'll find, almost without exception, is the same thing every time. Perfect teeth. Researchers examining fossils spanning thousands of years of human history have found the same pattern over and over. For the vast majority of human existence, people had straight teeth. Wide jaws. Room for every tooth including the third molars, what we now call wisdom teeth, to emerge without issue. The dental problems that fill orthodontists' waiting rooms today, crowding, impaction, crooked teeth, wisdom teeth that have to be surgically removed, these are not ancient problems. They are new ones. And here is where it gets strange, because the obvious explanation, the one most people assume, is that this is genetic. That some people are just born with smaller jaws, just like some people are born with bigger hands or smaller feet. That it's hereditary. Random. Unavoidable. That explanation is wrong. In the early 1900s, a dentist named Weston Price began noticing something he couldn't explain. Every ancient skull he examined had perfect dentition. But the living people around him, people eating modern industrialized food, had crowded, crooked, decaying teeth at rates that seemed almost epidemic. So he traveled. For a decade, he visited isolated populations around the world, Swiss mountain villages, African tribes, indigenous communities in Canada and Peru, groups who were still eating traditional, unprocessed diets. And in every single one of them, he found the same thing the ancient skulls had. Straight teeth. Wide jaws. No crowding. No impaction. Then he visited communities from those same regions who had recently switched to modern Western food, white flour, canned goods, sugar, processed everything. Within a single generation, the teeth had changed, not after thousands of years of gradual evolution. One generation. To understand why, you have to understand what your jaw actually is. It isn't fixed. It isn't a finished structure that stops growing and stays that way. Your jaw is bone. And bone responds to stress. It grows where it is used and shrinks where it isn't. For most of human history, eating was hard work. Not hard in the sense of finding food, hard in the physical sense. Grinding and tearing and crushing. Raw meat. Tough vegetables. Dried grains. Seeds that hadn't been milled into powder. Food that required your jaw to work for every bite. And so jaws were large. Because they had to be. Researchers estimate that until about 500 years ago, humans chewed for roughly 4 hours every single day. Just chewing. As a mechanical activity. The jaw muscles were constantly under load, constantly signaling to the bone around them, we need more space here, keep building. Then something changed. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we made things. It changed what we put in our mouths. Milling technologies removed the tough parts of grains, the germ and the bran, leaving behind soft white flour. Canning preserved food in forms that required almost no chewing. Refinement processes made everything smoother, softer, easier to swallow. Cooking, which had already been making food more digestible for thousands of years, accelerated further. By the time you were born, almost everything you ate had been pre-softened in some way. Bread, rice, pasta, oatmeal, smoothies, yogurt. Even the food considered healthy in the modern era, avocado, hummus, protein shakes, requires almost nothing from your jaw. Think about what you ate today. How much of it actually required sustained, forceful chewing? For most people the answer is close to nothing. And your jaw noticed. Here's what the science found when researchers actually tested this. In 1983, scientists raised two groups of squirrel monkeys on different diets. One group ate naturally tough food. The other ate artificially soft food. Same species. Same genetics. Different mouths. The soft food group developed crowded premolars. Rotated teeth. Displaced teeth. Narrower dental arches. A 2004 study did the same with hyraxes, small mammals related to elephants. Those raised on cooked food experienced roughly 10% less growth in the facial areas involved in chewing compared to those given raw, hard food. 10%. From food alone. No genetic difference. No other variable. And in humans, the numbers are more dramatic. Researchers studying populations that switched to industrialized diets found that within the first generation, not after centuries of evolution, the first generation, roughly 50% of the population developed malocclusion. A misaligned jaw. Crooked teeth. By the second generation, 60 to 70%. By the third, 80%. Look around. We're somewhere past the third generation now. But the jaw isn't just getting smaller in isolation. Here's the part that should unsettle you. When your jaw shrinks, the teeth don't shrink with it. Teeth are largely determined by genetics. They stay roughly the same size across generations. So what happens is a real estate problem. The same number of teeth. A smaller plot of land. They crowd. They rotate. They push each other sideways trying to find room. And the last teeth to arrive, the wisdom teeth, the third molars that show up in your late teens and early 20s, they find no space at all. This is why roughly 90% of modern humans have impacted wisdom teeth. Not because wisdom teeth are vestigial or unnecessary. But because the jaw that was supposed to fit them no longer exists. Your dentist calls it an impaction. What it actually is an architectural problem. A house built for 10 people that was quietly renovated down to 7 rooms. And it doesn't stop at teeth. This is where it gets genuinely dark. A smaller jaw means a smaller airway. The back of your throat, the space your tongue sits in, the passage your breath moves through, all of these are shaped by the structure of your jaw and the size of your palate. When the jaw shrinks, that space shrinks. This is why sleep apnea has become one of the fastest growing health conditions in the modern world. Why an enormous percentage of the population snores. Why so many people wake up tired no matter how long they sleep. Why children, are now being diagnosed with sleep disorders that generations ago almost didn't exist. Researchers looking at fetuses in the womb have found jaw sizes already smaller than they should be. Already developing the backward facial slant that's become common in modern populations. It's being passed down now. It's become part of what children inherit. The food changed the jaw. The jaw is now changing the children. There is one comparison that scientists return to when they want to illustrate how strange this is. 5,400 species of mammals live on this planet. Researchers have examined their dentition across species after species. Not one of them has crooked teeth. Not one. In the wild, across millions of years of evolution, no mammal develops the dental crowding that is now the majority experience for modern humans. The only exception, the only other mammal on Earth that shares this problem, is the bulldog. A dog bred by humans, specifically selected over generations to have a flat, compressed face. A face that's too small for its teeth. A jaw that doesn't fit together properly. The bulldog has crooked teeth because humans designed it that way. And somewhere in the last few hundred years, we did something similar to ourselves. Not through breeding, through breakfast. That 4,000-year-old skull in the museum didn't have better teeth because ancient life was better. Ancient life was harder in almost every way you can imagine. Shorter. More violent. More painful. But the jaw that worked for 4 hours a day chewing food that hadn't been processed into softness, that jaw grew the way it was supposed to grow. It had room for every tooth. It had an airway wide enough to breathe through without snoring. It had a face that was wide and flat and powerful in a way that the average modern face simply isn't anymore. You didn't lose that because of your genes. You lost it because someone decided, at some point in the last few centuries, that food should be easier to eat. And your face has been paying for it ever since.